The following is a paid program. WOR's airing of this program constitutes neither an endorsement of the products offered or the ideas expressed.
Welcome, everybody. It's the Radiosurgery Show with Dr. Gil Lederman, MD, New York's only Harvard-trained, triple board-certified radiation oncologist who brings you the latest cancer treatment news, interviewing world-renowned cancer experts, delving into special cases, and, of course, answering your questions. I'm Rob Redstone, broadcasting from the WOR studios in the heart of New York City. And now, please welcome Dr. Lederman.
Good morning. Good morning, all. Good morning, Rob, who's my co-host. He's new to WOR. He's been with me on ABC, and I hope you listen and enjoy his company, as do I. We have Eddie and Reggie in the control room to make this broadcast so fantastic. We're live. We're really live. You can test us, if you want to test us to see if we're live, by calling us at 800-321-0710. Is that right? Are we live?
That's
Are we
right.
here? Are we waiting for your calls?
Good morning, Dr. Lederman. Pleasure
How are
to
you
be
today?
here. Doing very well, thank you. How are you?
So can you believe it? Cancer treatment is in the news. It's the headlines in the Wall Street Journal. It's a headline across the top above the fold in the Wall Street Journal. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's big news then.
And I'm holding up the paper from just 2 days ago. So it's not so common that cancer treatment and radiation oncology get headline news in the Wall Street Journal.
That's right.
I think the number one paper in America.
Definitely. So what does it say?
Well, what does it say? It says something that we ought to learn from, and it really is talking about proton beam. Do you know what proton beam is?
It's where they shoot protons at a tumor. Is that correct?
What is a proton?
Proton is a type of particle that has, I believe, a positive charge.
And where does it sit in the atom? Do you remember where it sits from your old chemistry days?
It sits in the nucleus, correct?
Right. So there's in the nucleus there's the proton and the neutron,
Right.
which is a neutral charge, and then circling around. Remember these pictures from 1962 when Cuba was going to try to bomb us? So the electron is spinning around like the Earth spins around the sun.
Right.
So some people have tried to say that if you treat with protons cancer, you'll get better results.
Got it.
And what's so unique about protons? Do you have any idea?
I'm guessing that they kill cancer cells.
Well, that's a good idea. You're guessing just like everyone else. The problem is some people are spending $200 million for proton beam facilities, and they're guessing too. Because there's never been one paper in the last 60 years that shows protons better than photon. Photon is what you get. It's ionizing radiation. It's like what comes out of a light bulb, except it's much more powerful. When it hits cancer, it interferes with the bonds, the genetic bonds, and it inhibits the cell from dividing and multiplying.
Okay.
So from a cobalt machine, which was the radiation in the 1940s and 50s, and linear accelerators up till current time, most doctors use photons.
Okay.
So then came this idea that protons might be better. And the main advantage of protons is that when it enters the body, it has something called the Bragg peak. So imagine it enters the body, and it only goes a certain distance, and then it disappears.
Okay.
So, like, there's no exit dose. It's like
Right.
your mother-in-law, I mean, not like my mother-in-law, who's so fantastic, but someone's mother-in-law who she comes in, and then she never goes home. That's
Got
what
it.
a Bragg peak is. She's there, and it stops, and it doesn't exit.
Okay.
So a lot of people find that appealing, that there's no exit.
Yeah.
The problem is that this peak is usually just a peak. It's a point, like on a pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the cancer isn't just a point. Usually it has some dimensions.
Sure.
So doctors have to expand that peak. And there's a lot of technology. And since it hasn't been used long, there's a lot of learning curve, let's say.
Yeah.
And in all these years, 60 years that proton's been around, there's never been one study to show that protons are better than photons.
Okay.
But the facilities are very expensive. The facilities can cost up to $100 or $200 million. One of my patients came this week with prostate cancer, and he heard an advertisement about proton beam, and obviously a lot of patients love new technology, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people believe that new is better than old.
Right, yeah. Sounds promising.
Sounds promising, sounds hopeful, that it has to be better. Well, it's not, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes. And some of the technology is very expensive, and proton beam is very expensive. So we have a lot of patients rushing. Most experts in the field, for example, for prostate cancer, feel proton beam is experimental. Mm-hmm. It's not a proven technology. And all the results right now show inferior results. Actually, when we look at our results with proton beam, for example, if a man has a Gleason 6 or a Gleason 7, do you remember what Gleason is?
Yeah, so it basically looks at tumor cells under a microscope, and you look at the pattern, basically, and you get two numbers, right? So it's out of 10. So I guess the lowest number, I guess it would range from 2 to 10. Is that correct?
Yeah,
so
2 to 10. So in each area, the pathologist gives it a number from 1 to 5.
Right.
1 is the best, 5 is the worst.
Right.
So in 2 areas, you can have 1 plus 1 equals 2, which almost never occurs. The worst you can have is 5 plus 5 equals 10, which does occur, and we see it. And we'll talk about that later in the program also. So the more men in America have Gleason 6.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the higher, the worse the prognosis, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The higher the Gleason score, which is how it looks under the microscope, the worse the prognosis. The higher the PSA, which is the blood test, the worse the prognosis. And the higher the stage.
Right.
You know, the bigger the cancer, the more it's spread, the worse the prognosis. So if you have cancer, you obviously want low numbers rather than high numbers. And so if you have a Gleason 6 or 7, and you go to this famous Institute for Proton Beam that's been around for 20 years, the chance of being cancer-free with prostate cancer, proton beam treated, is 76%.
Mm-hmm.
And if they came to us for our radiosurgery and brachytherapy program, it's 87%. 14% more men would be cancer-free, and there's 250,000 men a year, so 14% would be about 30,000 more lives saved.
A lot of people.
It's a lot of people different, and the cost is less than half.
Mm-hmm. It's a big difference, too.
So if you're an insurance company and you have X dollars and the results are less good with proton beam and it costs more than double, what would you tell your customers?
I would say, I'm not going to cover that technology.
Well, that's what the headlines in the Wall Street Journal were exactly, that multiple insurance companies are now canceling coverage of proton beam. So there were 3 major insurers that have decided to stop covering proton beam for early-stage prostate cancer or are reviewing their policy. And they're saying that there's much less costly and more effective treatment for the money than proton beam. And Medicare pays about $32,000 for proton beam. So these centers are setting up with the idea they're going to get huge numbers of men with prostate cancer, even without any data.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you're a scientist. You went to NYU. You're in medical school. I mean, wouldn't like to do things without data backing you up.
Absolutely not.
And so you wonder how men are rushing to proton beam when there's no data showing it's superior, and yet it costs so much more. So Blue Cross of California sent letters to radiation oncologists and urologists saying that as of the end of October, they're not going to cover proton beam for early-stage prostate cancer. Several other companies also are not going to cover it. Cigna is planning to review its policy. Aetna, which is the 3rd largest insurer in America, has stopped covering prostate beam as of October 1st. Highmark in Pittsburgh and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City have longstanding opposition. Actually, they don't cover it. And WellPoint, which is one of the biggest insurance companies for healthcare, is trying to negotiate down the price. So rather than to not cover it, I guess they think, well, if they get it for the same price as other treatment, then men can choose if you want a less effective or more effective. You can have it as long as it doesn't cost us more money.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how different companies are proceeding with it. And it's interesting how many men are kind of going towards proton beam, even though there's not data for it. And it makes you wonder what's in our head and why are we rushing for something that is not considered recommended treatment, or some would even consider it experimental treatment. I've been at many medical meetings where experts in the field would consider proton beam experimental treatment.
Yeah. It's all about the data.
It's about the data. Well, the data and the cost. I mean, I was in Italy recently, and a patient had a tumor, and they applied for treatment in the United States at a proton beam center.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the letter. This proton beam center wanted from this patient cash up front before treatment, $250,000.
Wow. It's huge.
And we were offering treatment, which I believe is more effective, at a discount of 95%.
It's a big discount.
Yeah, but sometimes when you give too big of a discount, people think that something's wrong with you. You know, I just think that I'm trying to make it available for people to have, rather than get rich quick scheme. And sometimes people are suspicious when the price is too low. You know, often you'll hear consultants say, "Oh, the price is too low." I said, "Well, I can't do anything about it. I don't believe you should have people mortgaging their house and selling their car when I don't think it's right."
Yeah, but if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, then
if it works medically, you know, if it's good for the patient, then you can negotiate the price. But if it's not good, if there's better treatment out there, if you're exposing tens of thousands of men to radiation, it's going to have less good results.
Sure.
And puts them in a chance of recurrence. And then when they recur, the prognosis falls precipitously.
Yeah.
So it's really important to choose the best treatment first. And I would say that really very strongly, because after the best treatment first, all the other treatments are less good, and they're much less good.
That's absolutely right.
So here we are today. There's lots to talk about, and I'm glad we got the prostate proton data out there, which was really very important.
And let me remind listeners to call in. It's 1-800-321-0710. Again, that's 1-800-321-0710.
So we're happy to take your calls. There was an article also about metastatic colorectal cancer, which is also one of the most common cancers in America. And this scientific paper was a randomized study. So it was actually an interesting study because there's not too many randomized studies out there. Most take a small number of patients and they report what happened to them, but there's not a comparison.
Yeah.
And without a comparison, you don't really know, is the treatment better or worse? And that's what proton beam did. They never compared it to anything else.
Right.
They just went out and built expensive facilities. Anyway, so this study was from Holland, and there's this woman named Miriam Koopman, Kooman, MD, PhD from the Netherlands, and she randomized patients with colorectal cancer who were newly diagnosed. So they were virgin patients, and they were never treated before with chemo. So people who are virgin patients usually do better than those who have recurrent cancer. And they gave capecitabine with Avastin as an induction, which means initial treatment.
Right.
And all the patients got that. And then they randomly allocated patients to either no treatment or continued treatment. Mm-hmm. And patients often come and they say, "How long are you going to treat me, doc?" Right. And sometimes doctors say, "Well, you're going to have 6 cycles of chemo, and then we're going to follow you and see what happens." Sometimes doctors say, "Well, you're going to have chemo for the rest of your life."
Okay.
Which obviously some people are reassured by that they have something that they hold on to, and other people find it very difficult to know they're going to have chemo for the rest of their life.
It has side effects.
Yeah, there's a lot of side effects, but people hope that if they're getting treatment, that treatment means they're getting better.
Right.
So this study looked at that and who did better. Do you do better if you get chemo for the rest of your life, or you get 6 cycles and you go about your business?
I would. I don't know what the results are. I would hope that